On this episode, I'm going to share with you the most obvious Minnesota Vikings report that could ever come out in the history of Minnesota Vikings football. Like, I saw this report or this expert panel discussing the Minnesota Vikings. I'm like, no duh. So I'm going to share that with you in a moment. But I saw a controversial weekend of high school basketball play out. Hopkins Royals hosted the Wayzata Trojans. They're in the same conference, so they play twice a year. Apparently, Wayzata beat them by a ton earlier this year, but this is a Hopkins home game, and they're most likely to see themselves in the section final too. So it was a fascinating matchup, and there was a lot of controversy that played out in this basketball game. The Hopkins Royals team won by 1, and Wayzata had the ball with 5 seconds left. It appeared that there was a foul. They didn't call it. And Hopkins goes down, gets fouled. They miss the free throw on a 1-on-1. Wayzata chucks up a half-court shot, almost goes in, but Hopkins wins the game by 1. The Wayzata Trojan basketball team walks immediately to the locker room without shaking the hands of the Hopkins Royals opponents. The Hopkins Royals players pump up the crowd and get them to get in the faces of the Wayzata Trojans players as they walk off the floor. And they follow them all the way to the locker room to the point where there is a garbage can thrown at the Wayzata Trojans basketball program. You can see the head coach in the video. You can probably find this on X. You can see the head coach on the video like putting his hands out like that. Apparently after the game, the Wayzata Trojans and Hopkins Royals basketball coaches, their head coaches, were going at it with each other. And most likely a disagreement, I would imagine. And I was just watching this play out over the weekend and reading reports and looking at what happened. I watched the YouTube video. And we're in a crazy situation right now, and it's been going on for a while, where we have two clashing things going after each other. You've got respect, and then you've got a TikTok video. In order to get that TikTok video to get the amount of views that you're hoping for, or to make noise in the TikTok world, you need to clash against respect and get people's eyes to widen. So you see the Hopkins Royals fan base and the players getting in the face of the Wayzata Trojans basketball program walking off the floor and throwing garbage cans on them as they enter their locker room. And we live in a place where being a social media influencer is more respected than actually giving respect to another program or another head coach. And Wayzata isn't innocent in this thing either. But I was watching the replay, and it appeared that maybe the officials let the game get out of hand a little bit. There's players jawing at each other after every basket, and it appeared there should have been technical fouls called in this basketball game to try to avoid some of this nonsense following the game. Calm down the temperature in the room and take control of this game. But at the end of the day, players need to have respect for one another. And the fans attending the game need to understand where that line is. You do not follow the team to their locker room or throw garbage cans at them or get in their face as they walk off the floor. But where this stems from is from the head coaches of the Trojan and the Hopkins Royals basketball programs. They lost control of their team because these guys have enormous pressure on themselves from players and parents and the school to put together a winning basketball program that has the possibility of winning the state championship every year. But just because you have that pressure on you doesn't mean you act like fools and you lose complete control of your players. And you tell your players to not shake the hands of the opposing team. And you tell your players to chase down the opposing team all the way to the locker room. Apparently, Wayzata suspended some players for their next game against East Ridge, and Hopkins did not. So that speaks to some of the program for both schools. Maybe they were reactionary and weren't proactive in the situation, but at least they made a decision to say that their behavior was unacceptable. And it goes back to my point earlier. It is all about getting views. It is all about TikTok and Instagram. And when it's all about that, respect takes a backseat. Honor for the game and for the opposing team takes a backseat. Because the kids at the schools and the kids on the team, the head coaches take a big responsibility for their actions, but there also comes a point in time when you don't behave a certain way because you should just not behave a certain way. And the world tells us that we should act a certain way because it's all about getting views and likes and comments and traction. But respect and love for one another should take priority, and it doesn't. So, anyways, that's my take on that whole situation. As far as the Minnesota Vikings obvious report that I was sharing, so apparently some NFL experts, it looks like ESPN experts, were asked which team will struggle next season. Or in other words, which team will take a back seat as the next season arrives. So I got this from MinnesotaSportsFan.com, a tremendous website. And the Minnesota Vikings were high in the list. Of course they are. They won 14 games. Jeremy Fowler, a slight step back. They will remain playoff caliber. But it's tough to replicate a 14-win season when several key free agents are poised to leave and the offense could be breaking in a new quarterback. Jason Reed. So many things went right for them in 2024. It's difficult to imagine they will have as many things break their way, especially with a potential change at quarterback. Mike Tannenbaum, Sam Darnold played extremely well in 2024. But whether it's him or J.J. McCarthy as the starter in 2025, it'll be hard to replicate that kind of quarterback success. Now, it's hard to guarantee anything in sports because of the unpredictability. But one of the most easy things to guarantee is that the Minnesota Vikings will not win 14 games next season for a multitude of reasons. One, J.J. McCarthy is stepping in most likely as QB1. So there's a transition there. Number two, the likelihood that you're going to win 14 games is very, very unlikely. Almost probably 0% chance. Less than a 1% chance that the Minnesota Vikings win 14 games next year. I mean, this NFL season, how many teams won 13 games? The Bills won 13 games. The Chiefs won 15 games. The Eagles won 14 games. The Lions won 15 games. And the Vikings won 14 games. So is that 5 teams? So the likelihood that the Minnesota Vikings duplicate their success is going to be next to impossible. And it's not a shot at Kevin O'Connell or J.J. McCarthy that they can't duplicate their success this past season. In fact, I would rather prefer a 11 or 12 win season, but you roll into the playoffs and you win some football games. Winning 14 games means absolutely nothing if you're going into the playoffs and you're one and done. Winning 14 games means nothing if you're going to lose first round. Winning 15 games means nothing if you're a Detroit Lions fan, if you go into the playoffs with a bye and then lose that opening game against the Washington Commanders. So many people get lost in the wins and losses of the regular season. And it matters to a certain degree. The Eagles won a bunch of games. The Chiefs won a bunch of games. But at the end of the day, it's not about how many games you win in the regular season. It's about how impactful you are in the playoffs. The Eagles won 14 games, but they didn't have a bye week. They needed to win every single round. The Chiefs won 15 games, but they lost the Super Bowl. And at the end of the day, that's going to be a mark on Patrick Mahomes' legacy. Oh, he's 3-2 Super Bowls. So, yes, the Minnesota Vikings are going to take a step back next season. There's no way they don't take a step back. Their schedule is going to toughen up. They do have free agency money to spend, so they can add some players on offense and defense, hopefully in the secondary as well. But some of the Minnesota Vikings roster will turn over, and just the percentages that the Minnesota Vikings will win 14 games again in a conference with the Lions, Packers, and Bears is next to impossible. And I don't think that's a hot take. I could guarantee you right now the Minnesota Vikings will not win 14 games next season. In fact, I believe right now that it will be tough or a bigger challenge next season for the Minnesota Vikings to make the playoffs than it was this past season, because of the situation that's changing. Jaden Daniels made the playoffs his first year starting. Bo Nix made the playoffs his first year starting. But are they the exception or are they the rule? I feel like most likely they're the exception to the rule because of the performance that they put on the field this season and their ability to take their team to the playoffs. Can we expect the same from J.J. McCarthy? Hopefully. Hopefully he steps in and it's a flawless, seamless transition from McCarthy, from Sam Darnold to McCarthy. But do you expect there to be a little rough patch? Do you expect some growing pains? How do you not? Even Jaden Daniels had growing pains his rookie year. Even Bo Nix had growing pains his rookie year. And with the Minnesota Vikings playing in one of the toughest divisions in football, I can expect the Vikings to duplicate their 14-win year. I mean, this is one of the most obvious Minnesota Vikings reports that I've ever seen. Anyways, thank you for watching and thank you for making this podcast part of your day. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching and hit that follow button. If you're listening Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you're listening, iHeartRadio as well. Thank you. Appreciate you. And have a good day.